congratulate the 44 student musicians across the district who were selected to participate in all county ensembles for band, chorus, orchestra, and jazz band. Special congratulations to Brian Enos, Quinlan Bailey, and Riley Wendt, who were selected to perform with the New York State Band Directors Association Honor Band. And congratulations to Lauren Enos, who was selected to perform with the All Eastern Honor Band. And also congratulations to Will Green, who's in our audience this evening, because he was selected as well. And I'm proud of all of our student musicians. And while these events will all be virtual this year, I am confident that these will still be wonderful experiences and that all of our students will represent Riverhead well. So thank you and congratulations. Also congratulations to Pulaski Street Library Media Specialist, Amelia Estevez-Creedon. She received a New York State Educational Media Technology Association Media Literacy Grant in the amount of $1,250. She will have the Pulaski students analyze current practices in the media that promote bias, discrimination, or inequality. And the grant will be used to purchase materials for the students to use to create mechanisms for promoting awareness of social concerns, and these will be shared with the school community. Last Saturday, Lori Downs, Sam Schneider, high school PTO President Mary Mackey, and I attended the annual legislative workshop hosted by the Longwood School District. Typically, this is an in-person event, but it was held via Zoom. And we had the opportunity to hear from our local representatives, Senator Colombo, Assemblyman Thiel, Assemblywoman Giglio, along with other representatives from Suffolk County. And Sam and I are looking forward to meeting with our local state legislators next week to continue to discuss additional funding options for our schools. Our annual Black History Month celebration has been recorded, and it can be accessed on our district website beginning February 22nd. And our next Community Diversity and Cross-Cultural Task Force meeting will be Wednesday, February 24th at 7 p.m. via Zoom. And Parent University is scheduled for Thursday, February 25th at 6 p.m. via Zoom. And the topic is social, emotional learning, and support. So we'll be posting links for all of those events shortly. A reminder that schools are closed next week for President's Day and winter recess. And at this point, we have our first budget presentation of the school year. Give us 1 second while we set that up. So this evening, Mr. Schneider, Deputy Superintendent, and I will be presenting our first budget presentation. And this slide shows our agenda. And I think the impact of this year's contingency budget is on my mind every day, and as we plan for next year's budget. So that's going to be a theme throughout tonight's presentation. So let's get started. So back in January, the board adopted budget goals. I think the most important goal to me is to design and adopt a budget that recognizes the current fiscal reality for Riverhead residents. Last June and July, when the community went to the polls to vote for the school district budget, they told us that they didn't have confidence in our spending plan. So I think it's incredibly important this year for us to listen to their message from last year, learn from it, and put forward a spending plan that's in the best interest of our students and the community at the same time. So the budget formation process, every year, Mr. Schneider spearheads this event, and he meets with all of our stakeholders in the district. So we discuss with staff, what are your needs, what are your wishes for programs and goals for the coming school year? And then we take a look at those wishes and the current budget, and we ask ourselves, what works, what doesn't work? We design a spending plan to fix the things that aren't working and preserve the things that are working. And that's our goal, so that we can provide everything we can for our students.
So there are two sides to a budget. There are expenditures and there is revenue. So we need to remember that a budget is a fluid document. While we put together a plan with a number at the end, there are things that happen in the course of a year, just like things that happen in our own homes, that we don't necessarily anticipate, and we need the flexibility to respond to those things. So what about contingency? So the 2021 budget, the voters declined to approve that, so we are on contingency. And what that means is that we have the same tax levy amount as we did the prior year. So we didn't have growth there. And that is probably the greatest worry I have and the greatest challenge that we have with this current budget for 21-22 as we plan, is that we lost a year's growth of tax levy. And we want to make sure that we can restore programs that were cut under contingency and move our district forward with programs that we need for the 21-22 school year. Mr. Schneider.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's start with what the tax cap. This is how the beginning of the budget process. And we know what this is. The tax cap law has been around for a while and essentially states that the tax levy can increase, the tax levy being the amount of money we collect in property taxes, can increase by no more than 2% or CPI, whichever is lower, plus some exemptions. So how do we get to what that number is? There are a couple of components, and I want to walk you through the process. So we start with an important item, what's called the capital tax levy. In essence, the capital tax levy is the amount of money that we have to collect from the taxpayers in order to pay our existing debt. So we issue debt, the district issues debt for a number of things. You take the amount of money that is issued for debt for the district and for the BOCES that we are in. You subtract out the offset, the state aid that is received on that debt, and that remaining number is what's called the capital tax levy. That's the first component of calculating the property tax cap. The next component that you need to determine when calculating the property tax cap is something called pilot payments. Pilots are payments in lieu of taxes. This is money that municipalities receive from property owners who are exempted from paying their full share cost of property taxes. In this school district, these exemptions come from three sources: the Riverhead IDA, the Suffolk County IDA, and from solar farms, which are subject to either local or state regulatory authorities. It's important to note here, the district does not issue pilot payments. We are simply informed by the relevant authorities how much money we can expect in pilot payments. It is not our call. So this is a listing that shows the pilot payments that we have received or will be receiving as a result of agreements reached by the Riverhead IDA with various property owners in the town. And you can see that next year there's going to be an increase of $63,000. That's the Riverhead IDA pilots. On top of that, you have to add in the pilots from other authorities, the ones we talked about a few minutes ago. Culinary Arts Riverhead, that was issued by Suffolk County IDA. That's the Suffolk Community College facility in downtown Riverhead that teaches baking and cooking. And we have a number of solar farms and solar projects in the district. And so you can see that total there. Then, so those added two together, we know that we're going to be receiving $1.7 million in pilot payments next year, up from the $1.67 that we've received this year. So far we've gone through two components in the property tax cap calculation. First was the pilot payments and the capital tax levy. Two other important components in the calculation of the tax cap are the tax-based growth factor and the allowable levy growth factor. Those are given to us by New York State. The tax-based growth factor is a measure of how much development there is in a particular district. If there's no development at all, then the district is assigned a rating of 1, meaning that when you multiply it, nothing happens. Our factor this year is 1.0049. On top of that, the allowable levy growth factor is essentially the CPI measure that the state sets, and it's 1.23. So you go through all the math, and I show you how I do that there. And it shows that next year the tax levy can be no higher than $106 million, which is a 1.47% increase over this year's levy. Later on this evening, the Board of Education is going to be asked to approve an item that essentially approves this calculation. Districts are required to file a report with the New York State Comptroller and with SED by March 1st every year, indicating what our property tax cap calculation is and whether we reasonably anticipate that we're going to seek to override that. I think that, as the resolution states, the board hopefully will adopt that we don't intend to override that and that they agree with these calculations. Let's take a look. Ms. Tona touched on this a few minutes ago about how contingency affected the school district. So we have two different columns here. On the left, it shows you what could have happened had the budget passed. So had the budget passed, the tax levy was going to be not higher than $106 million. And then if you do that calculation that I just walked you through, that the coming year's tax cap would be no higher than $108 million. Now, with the contingency, the main impact is that you cannot raise the levy $1. So the tax levy in the 1920 year is the same tax levy in the 2021 year, and then you go through that, a difference of $2.3 million of what was lost in terms of available funding for the schools. Well, how will this affect us into the future? Now, I want to be very clear, and I say this, it's very difficult to predict exactly how the future would have gone had you gone down the road not taken, as the poem goes, because there are a number of moving parts, as you saw from the calculation. For purposes of this slide, I have kept everything steady. I've kept the same tax levy growth factor, I've kept the same pilot payments, I've kept everything steady. And you can see, as the years go on, the difference grows. So the first year out, it was $2.3 million. But by the time you get to the 25-26 school year, again, with all of those factors remaining steady, you get up to $2.5 million. I can only offer, I can offer this analogy, and here's how I would say it for somebody who's thinking about this. If you think about, if you wanted to drive your car from here in Riverhead to Los Angeles, that's a trip that should take you 5 days. However, if on one of those days you do not move your car, you will always be behind in that schedule. You will never make that 5 days to Los Angeles, and you will always be behind. And that's essentially what the position that we find ourselves in as a district, being on contingency. We spent one of our 5 days not moving, and so thus we will always be behind in our goal of getting to Los Angeles in 5 days. And so you can see how that's illustrated there.
So tonight's presentation focuses on general support, benefits, and debt service. For the most part, these are areas that are somewhat predictable at this point. We have a lot of information to help us formulate the budget in these areas. So I'll start with general support, and on the slide you can see what areas are covered by general support. The first of which, the Board of Education, the district clerk, and the annual meeting, which is the budget meeting and trustee election that happens in May. So our Board of Education members that are here to my left, they are volunteers. They do not get paid, so there is nothing in the budget in the way of a salary for our board members. So thank you all for all of your service. And also included, the board has primary responsibilities, for the most part, to adopt district policies, to approve the hiring and dismissal of district employees, and, as we're talking about tonight, oversee the public's tax dollars and assets. Also covered tonight, central administration and support. That includes the Office of the Superintendent and the operations that happen in that office, as well as the business office and the operations that take place there. And then there's some other entities that assist the offices with operations, and those costs are included in the budget.
So let's walk through some of those costs right now. So the first is the various regulatory audits that the district has to undertake. The first that I want to talk about is our annual external audit. It's conducted, currently our external auditor is Cullen Danowski. This is an audit of our financial standing. The board hires an outside agency, an outside auditing firm, to come in and provide the board with a report as to the financial standing of the district. It's a measure of the district's books and records. The second audit that I want to talk about is the internal audit. This is what you would call a practices and procedures audit. The internal auditor for the district currently is Questar 3 BOCES, and the last audit that we have to undertake is what's called the claims audit. This is a weekly audit in which an outside firm comes in to look at the bills that we seek to pay, to make sure that the bills presented are accurate, that there is a correct record keeping, that the check reflects what the bill is, the current Claims auditor is a firm, McDonald Rand. So you can see the costs for these 3 audits for next year. However, on top of that, we also have to pay for the preparation of certain component reports of the annual external audit, the property appraisal, and the workers' compensation actuarial study. Formerly, there was a 3rd component that we had to pay for, was the preparation of the district's financial statement. We have largely brought that in-house. The district's treasurer takes care of that. It saves the district $14,000 a year. Another component that's important that we have to talk about as part of the general support is our property and liability insurance. Most of our property and liability insurance we purchase through New York Schools Insurance Reciprocal. We call that NYSER. NYSER is an organization that is owned by the school districts that participate in its insurance plan. It is only for public school districts. The boxes that you see in yellow are the insurances that we get through NYSER. The other boxes, the 3 lines in blue, are insurance lines that NYSER is not permitted by law to write, so we have other vendors who provide those insurances for us. Now, insurance in the budget, property and liability insurance in the budget, is listed in 2 different sections of the budget. The first being unallocated insurance. That's in what we call the general central support category that we're talking about this evening. The other category is vehicle insurance. That is budgeted in the transportation section of our budget that we're going to be talking about in part on March 9th. So you put all that together that we talked about this evening, and you can see that next year, the general support, we are recommending an appropriation of $4.1 million. Now, let me just caution you, with the yellow box there on the first line, that is an artificially high increase. The money that we need to pay for the elections management system, it's called the BOLD system that runs our annual election, used to be budgeted in the computer technology codes. Really, it's a function of the annual district meeting, so we're moving that money from where I believe it's erroneously placed to where it should be placed as part of the annual meeting costs. So you can see the increases there.
So a large portion of the budget is made up of salaries, and educating students is done by people, and transporting students is done by people, so that's why salaries make up a large portion of the budget. And most of our district employees are employed through a union contract. So the raises that they receive on an annual basis are dictated by the terms of that contract that's been decided upon through collective bargaining, and cannot be unilaterally changed from any given year to the next based on what's in their contract. So then we have pension costs. And our employees are either instructional employees who are part of New York State Teachers Retirement System, or non-instructional employees that are part of New York State Employees Retirement System. These agencies dictate to districts what the costs will be on an annual basis and any increases that are involved. And it's a requirement for our employees to be part of one of these 2 pension systems, and there is an employee contribution as well as an employer contribution. So we're talking about the employer contribution here.
So the way that the employer contribution is calculated is that you take an employee's wages, you multiply it by the percentage that you see on the screen, depending on which retirement system they participate in, and that is what the district has to turn over to the retirement system on an annual basis. The retirement system functions like this. It is required by the New York State Constitution to be funded to 104% of its liability. Now, these pension systems are huge, huge funds. They are some of the largest funds in the world. They invest in all manner of different investments. When things do well on Wall Street, they need less money from public agencies, employers, to stay at that 104% of their liability. When they do not do well on Wall Street, when things are not going well, they need more money from their participating employers in order to stay at 104% of their liability. We know that in terms of the impact on the budget, each 1/10 of a point percentage change in the contribution rate equates to approximately $55,000 in our budget. Budgeting for ERS, the Employees Retirement System, is a little tricky. Their fiscal year begins on April 1st. So we have to guess approximately where we think their contribution rate is going to be for the following April, May, and June when we set the budget. We know what the contribution rate is going to be for the first 9 months of our fiscal year, and then we have to make an educated guess as to where we think it's going to go for the last 3 months of our fiscal year in order to have the appropriate amount of money in the budget. I talked a minute ago about how the pension system contribution rate is tied to Wall Street. You can see this chart illustrates the TRS contribution rates since 1978. In the high-flying years of the dot-com boom in 2000, the early 2000s, you can see the contribution rate was a pittance. In tougher economic times, you can see that the contribution rate goes up. There's an article in Newsday, it was either yesterday or today, which talks about how employers should expect the contribution rate to increase at a great amount in coming years. The way that the contribution rate is calculated, it's based on 5-year rolling average. So as the 5-year rolling average begins to feel the effect of the pandemic, we can reasonably expect increased contribution rates in future years. That's going to be a topic for future years and future budgets to deal with, but I do want the board to be aware that we should expect to see these numbers higher when we're back here a year from now. Another important component of the budget that we're talking about this evening is workers' compensation. When one of our employees is injured at work, and of course we hope that doesn't happen, but sometimes it does, accidents happen, the employee's health insurance does not cover the costs of their injuries. It is covered solely by our workers' compensation, which we are self-insured. All decisions on the benefits that are paid and the treatment plan that is approved for an employee on workers' compensation are made by an independent state agency called the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. The district does not have a say in their decisions. We employ an outside consultant to administer the program, to communicate with the Workers' Compensation Board, but the Workers' Compensation Board's decisions are theirs alone. I wanted to give you a look at some of the costs for workers' compensation. And so what I did was I picked three, we pay checks on a bi-weekly basis. So I picked 3 warrants that we recently came through my office, and I broke the expenses down into 5 general categories. The first is paying employees who are injured at work and who have permanent loss of use of certain parts of their body as a result of their injury. These are permanent. They go on for the length of the employee's life. We have an employee or a former employee who was injured on the job in 1991, and we are still paying that employee a check every 2 weeks as dictated by a ruling from the Workers' Compensation Board. The next category, and so you can see the costs of that are very steady. The next category is wages, lost wages for temporary injuries, injuries that have either are expected to heal or have not been fully adjudicated by the Workers' Compensation Board. We are also responsible for medical costs, legal fees, and pharmaceutical costs. And you can see how there's a variety of, varied amount of expense on just these 3 weeks that I selected for you. This is our total workers' compensation costs stating back year by year since 2008-9. They vary. If we have an employee who's injured who needs, for example, a knee replacement, we can reasonably expect to spend more than $100,000 on employees' needs alone. To date, we have spent $516,000 in workers' compensation costs this year. So if you extrapolate that out based on the amount of time left in the year, I'm estimating that we're projecting that we're going to spend $886,000 in workers' compensation costs this year. Therefore, I'm recommending to the superintendent and to you, the board, that we appropriate $886,000 in next year's budget for workers' compensation costs. Obviously, we do everything we can to help control these costs by issuing safety reminders, providing training to employees, making sure that parking lots, for example, are carefully sanded. This would be a good opportunity for me to mention that the temperature is dropping outside the auditorium right now, so please use caution when leaving the board meeting this evening and step carefully so you do not slip on ice that may have formed since you parked your car, and help control our workers' compensation costs. So that's workers' compensation. Health insurance is another important component. The district participates in the New York State Health Insurance Program. Empire NYSHIP is what it's called. The rates are set by the program each December for the period coming up January through December. So when we budget for this, we have to make an estimate as to where we think the rates are going to go for 6 months, for the back half of 6 months of our fiscal year. Employees and eligible retirees pay a portion of the cost of insurance that is set by negotiated contract. So let me walk you through how I arrive at what I think we're going to need for health insurance. So there's 2 general categories we're talking about here, active employees and retired employees. In active employees, under the rules of Empire Knightship, there are two categories. Either you have single coverage or family coverage. The full share cost for single coverage is about $13,000 a year. The full share cost for family coverage is about $30,000 a year. So we know how many enrollees we have. Altogether, the full share cost is just over $16 million. For retirees, it's a little more complicated. We have the full share cost for those who are under the age of 65 with single and family. And then we have the cost for people who are above the age of 65. As anyone who has turned 65 knows, when you turn 65, Medicare becomes your primary insurance, and you have to get secondary insurance to cover the gaps. The district's insurance becomes secondary for those who seek to keep it on. You can see that the costs drop precipitously for that coverage because the insurance is secondary only. So you add in all the costs of the retirees, full share, that's another $13.2 million for $19.3 million in whole share costs of health insurance. We know, however, we talked about what the employees and the retirees contribute. That's just over $4 million. So therefore, it's a subtotal district cost of 15.2. So in looking at next year's budget, we know what the rates are going to be for July through December because they're already set. So I took 15.2 million, divided it in half, and that's that number you see there, 3 up from the bottom. Then I have to estimate where I think the costs are going to go for January through June. The general practice amongst business officials and boards of education is to budget for a 10% rate increase. Some years it's more, some years it's less. 10% is a very conservative guess. You can't miss on this because if you don't have enough money appropriated in the budget, you still have to provide that health insurance and you're going to have to make cuts somewhere else. I should note that since 1999, the cost of health insurance has risen 324%. So a 10% increase is not an unreasonable guess. So therefore, you do all that math, and I'm recommending that we appropriate $15.9 million for health insurance in next year's budget. Let's talk about debt service. Debt service is to pay back for money that we've borrowed for capital projects, for the work that was done based on the 2011 bond, the turf field, bus purchases, and an energy performance contract. I should note that this coming year is the last year of repayment for the turf field. So when we have this conversation a year from now, we're not going to be talking about the costs for turf field. It will have gone from the budget. Part of the debt service is something that is called the TAN, the Tax Anticipation Note. So let's talk about what that is. We receive money from the towns that they collect in property taxes twice a year. It generally comes in a large chunk around this time of the year, January, February, and then again in May and June. Which means for 6 months of the year, we have no revenue coming in. But unfortunately, for those 6 months of the year, we have expenses going out. So districts have to borrow money in anticipation of receiving taxes, tax anticipation note. As a way to cut interest costs on the TAN, we pioneered a methodology last year where we borrowed our TAN in 2 series. We borrow a large chunk of money in the fall. We pay back a portion of it in February after we receive that influx of the first round of property taxes, and then we pay back the balance in June. That has saved us $167,000 in interest in the last 2 years. And so we're going to continue to do that in future years, pending the board's approval, as a way to save interest costs for the taxpayers for the TAN that we need to operate. So this shows the debt service of where we are. Now, if you remember back to earlier in the presentation, we talked about that capital tax levy, and if you compare these 2 numbers, they're not the same. And you say, why are they not the same? Have you made a mistake? The answer is no. You cannot count the tax anticipation note costs as an exemption under the property tax cap calculation, which is very frustrating because we have to borrow this money, but we're not, and we have to pay interest on the borrowing, but we're not allowed to exempt that cost under the capital tax levy calculation. So again, we talked about a moment ago the turf field. So the turf field is budgeted where it says buses and turf. That number is going to be much less next year as we retire the turf field debt this coming fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. So our future presentations are outlined on this slide. March 9th, March 23rd will be the last 2 presentations. Then April 20th will be the adoption of the proposed budget by the Board of Education, and the public hearing on May 11th, and the budget vote on May 18th from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So if you have any questions, the board can certainly ask them now or in the future, and members of the community can call or write to either myself or Mr. Schneider. And this presentation will be posted on the website tomorrow morning, as well as all future presentations will be on the website. So we certainly hope that you found this presentation informative, and I'd like to thank Mr. Schneider for all of his work. This is definitely his busy season as we prepare the budget for the next school year.
Thank you, Ms. Toner. Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Do any board members have any questions at this time? No? Okie dokie, so we're going to move along now. Consent agenda. Can I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Can I have a second?
Second. Door motion, then I second.
Oh, okay. Got a second. Any cares and concerns? Not seeing any? All in favor? Motion passes. We have nothing here on old business. New business is, this is a call for a special meeting with Riverhead and Baiting Hollow Library vote. Could I have a motion, please? Thank you, Therese. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Virginia. Any questions, cares, or concerns? Not seeing any. All in favor? Motion passes. Item B is appointment to vote workers for special district meeting. This is our budget vote. Is it? No, it's the library vote for April 6th and the inspectors. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Virginia. Any questions, cares, or concerns? Not seeing any. All in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. Let us see. Approval to attend NISPA workshop. This is actually for me. I want to go to the live virtual superintendent's evaluation workshop, which at a cost of $130. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Thank you, Ms. Zahowski. Cares and concerns? Not seeing any. All in favor? Thank you.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
I do have one request. When you finish your workshop, could you turnkey, we call it turnkey, your materials? Can you share them with the board?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Approval, item D, approval of property tax calculations. These are actually the calculations that you just saw in the presentation. And the board intends to design a budget that compiles with those property tax cap limitations. Can I have a motion? Motion. Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Virginia. Any questions, cares, and concerns? Not seeing any. All in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. Item E is an authorization of agreement. This is concerning data security and compliance with the standards set by Educational Law Section 2-D, effective February 9th, 2021 through June 30th, 2021. Can I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Second? Thank you, Ms. Zahowski. Any cares and concerns? Not seeing any. All in favor? Thank you. Letter F, approval of new contract. This is with Cullen and Downowski for financial statement preparation for the 2020-2021 fiscal year in amount not to exceed $12,000. Can I have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Zahowski. Second? Oh, thank you, Mr. Dorr. Any cares, concerns, questions? Not seeing any. All in favor? Motion passes. Letter G is approval of donation. This is resolved that the Board of Education of the Riverhead Central School District accepts a donation from a high school student, William Green, in the amount of $1,000 to be used within the music department, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education of the Riverhead Central School District hereby authorizes a budgetary increase to the budget line of A2110-5021, 02-2110 in the amount of $1,000. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Second. Is that Therese? Any questions?
No, just
All in favor?
Thank you.
It
Yes, thank
passes.
you.
I just want to say thank you. Will, I want to thank you for your generous donation to the school and to this community. I understand that you want to address the board. I invite you to come up to the podium and speak.
Good evening, Board of Education members and school administrators. Thank you for putting me on the agenda this evening. My name is William Green, and I am a senior at Riverhead High School. This has been a very difficult year between the COVID-19 pandemic and the austerity budget. In the past years, all of my nights have been filled with the different clubs offered after school. Under these new circumstances, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I wanted to do something to give back to the community. Albert Einstein once said, "I see my life in terms of music." And that's exactly how my mind works. My first thought were the young musicians who won't have the same opportunities that I had to participate in the various extra ensembles. With that in mind, I started a percussion academy at my house where I could safely offer individual lessons to the young students who have the same passion I have for music. I emphasized that the academy was free, but many parents insisted on paying me for my time. I was very upfront telling them that all money collected would be donated to the Riverhead Fine Arts Department. Therefore, I would like to present the district with a check for $1,000 that I have collected through the academy. I truly believe that Mr. Rockcamp will use this money where it is most needed, whether it is at Pulaski, the middle school, or the high school. Lastly, I would like to personally thank all of you for reinstating the spring clubs and sports, which gives us all some hope that we can perform again before we graduate. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. The board is grateful for your efforts and your dedication to other students to help them grow with their musical talent. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Opportunity for board members. We have any committee stuff? There's no committees this week, right? Any board member remarks? I know I have something to say. The other day I took note of the Riverhead Town Supervisor's State of the Town statement that was published yesterday in the local media. And I'm proud of, what we want to say is, I'm proud of working relationship with Riverhead Central School District has with all three of our towns within our district, Southampton, Brookhaven, and also Riverhead. While we may share the name with the town of Riverhead, we are independent government with the school in the town. We're independent from the town. It just happened to have Riverhead. We are independent government. The district programs and the activities under the Board of Education, it's all our jurisdiction. We do recognize that when we do work together, everyone in Riverhead benefits. And we have met with the town once already, a month or two ago, and we're going to be meeting with them again. And we're going to continue this as things arise and things need to be talked about. So I just wanted the people to know that we're working on it, they're working on it, and it's going to all smooth out in the end. Anybody else?
Yes, I just want to congratulate Dr. Kerner because she's published her book, actually, I Can in Empowerment. And so, it's a wonderful accomplishment. So, and we're glad that, you know, you're here in this district. So thank you.
Congratulations, Dr. Kerner. I do have a question, though, that maybe, I don't know, Sam or Ms. Toner could answer. With the way that the sports is set up in Suffolk County, they're not going to allow any people to attend them. Is there a way that our district can either live stream them or record them and have them put on the YouTube so our students that really want to see them can possibly see them?
We could certainly look into that. I know other districts, for the most part, are looking to live stream their home events. So we can look into that as well.
Yeah, because the kids have been hurting as it is, and now it's like, yay, we got it. So the kids that are playing it is like, yay, I'm playing. But the kids that like to watch it, they're still...
And the parents.
And the parents, definitely. The parents, I mean, it's not, unless it changes, but I don't think so.
Ms.
No.
Downs, this might not be an issue because the only sports we're having are the spring and they're outdoors. So I don't know. I know the section's not allowing any indoor winter spectators, but outdoor might be a little different.
Well, I only asked the question because I had parents come to me with that question.
Yeah, so we're hoping that being spring, being outside, we can social distance, we're not stuck in a gymnasium, we'll be able to.
Hopefully, we certainly hope that that's the case. That'll make it easier for everyone, and the weather will be warmer. People want to be outside, but we don't know yet. Section 11 hasn't indicated where they're going with that yet.
Thank you. Any other board members? Nope. RCFA? Are you here? Okay, he's not here. Opportunity for the public? Do we have anyone online, Miss Lisa? No?
Hi, my name is Jane Netwich. I'm from Aquabog. I just wanted to congratulate Will Green. My son happens to be one of the children that has been lucky enough to take lessons through him, and he has been just amazing. So I just wanted to say a special congratulations to him.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. Steve Lagnina from Aquabog. I just wanted to make a comment about last week's new business. It was the walk-on agenda item H, and it was regarding the development in the town as being unsustainable, also concerns about the enforcement of the existing housing downtown, and I believe the last component was regarding finding solutions to resolve any loss in revenue as a result of the tax abatements. So I just want to applaud the board for putting that forward. It means so much, I think, to the community to make sure that we get our fair share of tax dollars. And to your point regarding working with the town of Riverhead, I think that is excellent. I think there's reasonable solutions that could be had. One such solution may be to consider having the developers who enter into an industrial development agency abatement to guarantee that they pay their full share of taxes toward the school district. Not the rest of it, but it could be towards the school district. And I'm also well aware that they have agreed to those for sewer and water in the past. So why not our school district, so that way Will Green, along with a number of other students, can have these great programs that you put forward as a Board of Education and as a school district.
Thank you. We have met with the IDA a few times over the last couple of years. When it comes to them helping the school district out, it's like, no way. They just won't do it. They have their procedure, but our whole reasoning for doing what you just read, that resolution, is now developer comes in and they're talking about more apartments. And the fact of the matter is, these apartments come into our district. They might start off with 5 kids in it, but if you got 50, 60 apartments, you don't know how many kids. So the fact of the matter is, yes, we need to reach out to these developers and say, look, could you help us possibly add some stuff that we need, like classrooms, a hall, a wing, something. They're getting away, like you said, the IDA, they'll give them a break, they'll give them a 10-year break. So like, yes, you're starting off because there's nothing built on there yet, so there's really no taxes. And as they build and as it goes, we go up. But then we don't get the full amount until 10 years, and then they turn around and give them another 10, or another 5. So it's like they never catch up to what really we should be getting. So that was the intent of the board, and I'm glad that it passed, and I'm glad that you're happy about it. Thank you.
It is very much appreciated, and it just ties into earlier what the Assistant Superintendent, Sam, had indicated regarding the pilots. While that does appear to be revenue, I believe it's about $1.2 million that we received. It's probably only half of that. I do believe the actual number that, if not for the pilot, we would have received an extra $1,495,283. And that was going on last year's numbers. So
Right.
Once again, thank you so much for your time and effort in this issue. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, not seeing anybody else. I guess that's the end of our show. Oh, God. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Motion. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Second. Thank you, Virginia. Any comments, cares, and concerns? Not seeing any. All in favor? Good night, everybody. Safe home.